Welcome to the SOB radio show, where we have fun, interesting guests, and hot topics. Each week, we offer insights into music, fashion, health, fitness, and humor. Do you have the perfect guest for us to interview? I want to know. Drop me a line on our Facebook page at Spunky Old Broad 1 or reach out to me on our website at spunkyoldbroad.com. And now, back to the show.
My guest is Rosemary Ravinel, and for those of you who tuned into the first part of our show, you know she's an accredited PR person, a NAE speaker certified visual presenter, a media expert, an executive coach, and a public speaker. And we've been talking about all the things that she's doing now with her Zoom training because people need it. They're doing such a poor job of it. So first of all, I want to welcome Rosemary back. And I want to ask you, because I know that I have my own opinion on this, what are some of the joys of being your own boss? I mean, people always think that it's wonderful, you know, to have your own company, but a lot of people just really buy another job. You know, they don't really have a company. So what do you find is the best part of being your own boss?
It's a complex question, Gail, because it's a love-hate relationship. The ability to do with my time as I want, except obviously for client commitments. But the ability to plan my day and to distribute my energies more effectively so that I can be my best is a luxury. The times where I can disconnect and exercise or meditate or do something artistic or work in my garden, and sometimes I work those into the workday just to break the strain of being in front of a camera, you know, connected on video, and not moving my body, because it's important to, you know, to breathe properly and to stretch and to increase your circulation and do all those things that stimulate your thinking as well. And so that's something that doesn't necessarily come with a corporate job. Yet the freedom that I have as a solopreneur, basically, I work with freelancers and have collaborators from time to time, but that also comes with a sense of lack of collaboration in day-to-day, going to a place where, as they say, everybody knows your name and people are happy to see you, and you have a sense of belonging in a tribe of people. And so that part is something I wish I could find in my current state of working for myself. And I know that a lot has to do, of course, with the fact that we've been isolated, working remotely, but I see a lot of people are coming back to doing meetings and associations and events where I can find that connection with like-minded people.
Yeah, it is so important to be able to have peers and friends and, you know, just people who know who you are and what you do and can refer you and so forth. That's all a part of, you know, having your own company, and that's really important. But you mentioned earlier in our first segment about, you know, coming from Cuba and having parents who said this is what you can do and this is what you can't do. So what were some of the dreams and aspirations you had as a young girl or even a teenager that, you know, you didn't either get to realize or were quashed, because you seemed to do quite well, even though you were limited?
Yes. Well, as a refugee from Castro's Cuba, of course, we came with a mindset of really being strangers in a strange land, because we came with, like so many Cubans, exiles, with nothing but the clothes on our backs. And the struggle that my parents undertook was quite arduous, and so I understand that from their perspective, they were trying to shelter me from danger, and you know they still found themselves really uprooted and in a place where they couldn't quite acculturate. So with their best intentions, you know, my father wanted me to be a secretary. My mother wanted me to be a teacher. And I always wanted to be a journalist and a broadcaster and a communicator. And it was quite a struggle for me to even be allowed to go away to school. And that struggle went on and went into my 20s. And I did it sort of on the sly, trying to find ways of in exerting my desires and following my dreams, but at the same time doing it sort of incognito. So it was not great to have to do that, but eventually they realized that I had a calling and that I had talents that I needed to pursue. But I'm glad I didn't become a teacher, as much as I respect teachers, and I'm very glad I didn't become a secretary.
I remember my mom telling me to take typing when I was in, I think I was in ninth grade. And she said, you'll always use it. And I can tell you, as much as I did not like my typing teacher, who was a total shrew, typing has been one of my greatest skills, that I'm able to do, especially on a computer now. But, yeah, I mean, how old were you when you actually came to the United States?
I was 8. I was 8 years old.
And did you and your family speak English?
No, none of us spoke English. None of us spoke English. And the advantage that I had, as painful as it was at the time, was that in order for my parents to settle in and to really make make a new life here, they enrolled me in a boarding school, in a Catholic boarding school, where I stayed for several years. And that was traumatic in that I was the only child who did not speak English. And that was difficult for me at the time. Never been away from home, in a place where I knew no one and no one spoke the only language I knew. But it forced me in an immersion into English in such a way that I was able to learn English without an accent. And it also helped that I came young, because some of my friends who came when they were in their teens were not able to lose the accent because they came a little later in their adolescence. And I was fortunate to come at a time when I could be the sponge to learn the new language without necessarily forgetting my native language. And so that's why I don't speak with an accent.
Wow, that's fabulous. Well, I have to tell you, I really admire your parents who did not speak English and yet assimilated well, and that's great. And that they did let you get, to a boarding school where you took advantage of the education that was there for you. So, since this is a program for women 50 plus, and there are many women who, when they hit 50 or even 60, they'll say, my life is over, what can I do? What words of wisdom do you have for what I call and you call other SOB women who are considering reinventing their career and their lives?
Oh, I would say that our own thoughts of limitation, the complacency to sort of accept the role that society wants to impose on us, that's just toss that out the window. You can do whatever you set your mind to do. Of course, be cognizant of that you have to keep good health and maybe take certain measures that you didn't have to do when you were in your 20s. Take extra special care of your body and your mind. But there should be no limits to what you can do. I have on my bulletin board a quote from Diana Nyad, the swimmer, and that she made all these attempts to swim from Havana to Key West, and she finally succeeded at the age of 62, I believe. But she had numerous failed attempts, and she said, "I'm going to do this." And she took up swimming late. She was a champion swimmer in her early life, and then took 30 years off and then returned to swimming. I look at her quote on my bulletin board and I say, of course, there's nothing you can do, and never give up. And that's, I think, what we need to learn to do, just to not let anyone say no. And as I mentioned earlier, if someone closes or blocks our path, carve out a new one. I mean, we live in an age where we have access to social media, and we can find our tribe. We can find people who appreciate what we have to offer by reaching really people all around the world. I was reading about a gentleman in the UK, I believe, who's a gardener, and he started to post photos of his gardens, vegetable and garden, and just he's a colorful man, and then started to do that on Instagram, and then developed a cult following where now he's like been offered a TV show. So he did what he loved. He found a way to share his love of gardening with the world. I mean, I think I'm simplifying the story, but I think you understand what I mean. Is don't be afraid to do what you love, and never let anyone tell you that you're old. Never, because what we do is we right. We're just maturing to different facets of who we are. I mean, it's none of us ever stays the same. Even children grow. We're always in the process of aging, and that's a wonderful thing. Just do it.
Well, there are some people, there are some people, Rosemary, who constantly think of themselves as victims, and they may be a victim, but that doesn't mean you have to stay a victim. And I think that's the difference. And you can always blame everybody else, or you can say, yeah, I was not given a fair deal. This is not right. I'm not happy with the way it is, and I'm going to change it, and then go ahead and change it. So what do you think are some myths about women growing older that you realize now are not true?
Oh, that we are, that we are sort of trapped in what society prescribes. That is totally false. In fact, I canceled my AARP membership because I don't like to be sent messages about you're old, you need this product because you're old, you can't hear, you can't walk, you can't. It's like, hello, this is not for me. I'm sorry, I'm not your target. There are people who do need assistance in many ways, but that's there's just like the catch-all that you hit a certain age, and then of course you're going to need a walker, and of course you're going to need to have a walk-in bathtub. No, we're aging better, and we are living fruitful, wholehearted, active lives well into 80s, and some people into 90s. And so, what is it? That it's up to you. It's up to you to make it what you want. You can find love again. You can travel. You can create businesses. You can find alliances with women who have the same energy and want to channel it into something productive. There are so many things that you can do, but don't let anyone say no.
Well, you brought up a really important point, and that's falling in love again. I wrote a program, and I interviewed 5 dating coaches plus a guy in his 70s, and it's all about find love after 50. And it's really interesting to see what turns people on and what they think is important after 50 compared to what they think is important when they're 20. So is it possible to fall in love again when you're over 50?
Yes, of course. Of course. But one thing that I believe is different is that you have to fall in love with yourself first. If you haven't fallen in love with yourself by 50, you need to really take a look inside. Because mature love is about 2 whole human beings coming together to continue growing and sharing great experiences. It's not about reproduction anymore, right? And it's probably isn't even about great sex anymore, although it is possible. But the motivation is different. It's about great companionship. It's about laughter. It's about exploration. But I believe that in our age group, we need to be whole human beings if we're going to connect in a meaningful way with other people, and find a life partner. Or it may not be a life partner. It may be a partner for a while, for a certain number of years. Nothing is forever. But I think it is possible. It's just the way you approach it.
Well, it's funny. I was just thinking about this the other day because now they're doing all the promos on TV for things like Love Island and Married at First Sight, and you've got The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. And I've never watched any of these shows. And I keep thinking to myself, who on earth in their right mind would go on TV to find the love of their life or marry somebody that they have never even seen before, or, go to an island to say, yeah, I'm here to fall in love. And it's not going to last. And it's always amazing to me that people put themselves in that kind of situation. And they're all these young, beautiful, handsome types. And I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe, but I just even couldn't imagine myself at that age doing something like that. So I think that what you're talking about are values. And I think as people age, their value system gets set in a better way, and they know what they're looking for, and it's a part of who they are. And, in fact, the thing that this gentleman said, which I thought was, I never had thought about this before. He said when a woman went on a date with him, and remember now, he's in his 70s, but I think maybe he was in his 60s when all of this was going on. And he said, and she would pull out pictures of her grandchildren, that endeared her to him more because it was about family. And that's what he was interested in, not someone who was a, high-fly and floozy. He was interested in someone who was interested in family, and that made a big difference. And I wondered, with all these high-powered executives that you work with, if you see any kind of family value that is a continuum in them.
Yes, well, I encourage, particularly when I'm working with someone who wants to improve his or her presence on video conferencing, on Zoom and the other platforms, is to present themselves as a whole human being. Hence, having a family photo visible, having some evidence that your life is beyond your job description, and that humanizes you. That brings you, that makes you more touchable, given that this is obviously a digital representation of who you are, but you can warm it up with evidence that you have a life beyond the job. And that's important. And very often they say, well, why should anyone care? It doesn't matter how many children you have or how many grandchildren. It's just to have these images that show that you have a priority with family. And so it is important, but it's sometimes difficult to convince them to do so and for them to see the benefit. But you see it a lot in the people who are interviewed on cable news. If you notice, there's a growing incidence of people showing their family photos of actually having their dogs in the shot, and that's usually received very warmly.
Yeah, I'm amazed how many libraries filled with books are in the background of people with the Zoom meetings and so forth. But that's true. I mean, if you see somebody with guitars, or you see somebody with fishing equipment, or you see photographs of the family or golfing or things like that, it does humanize a person, and I think that's important. And I also, I would ask you, because I remember when the pandemic first started and people first started using Zoom, and there was a big controversy with CEOs about, having people do Zoom meetings and have their kids walk in the middle, or a dog or a cat or whatever. And then within about 6 weeks, it was happening to them. And so they were much more tolerant of, what was going on in the world and life around them, and they seemed to warm up to it. So I think there's a lot of lessons that have been learned. What are some of the biggest lessons that you think top leaders have learned from all of this Zooming? Because people are Zoomed out.
There's a lot of lessons that have been learned, and we continue to learn them. It's that people need to be loved, in a sense of treating everyone in a meeting with particular, empathy. I know the empathy is a word that's been overused lately, but it's a very important word and a very important human trait, is to be empathetic to others. If you have people who report to you and you're leading a meeting, to understand that there will be a barking dog, there will be children perhaps being homeschooled who are talking, and they're children after all, and that we connect with each other's lives in ways that go beyond the job. So that having check-in time when meetings start, for example, I advise my clients always to take, good 10, 15 minutes, carve it into the agenda to check in on people How is the family? How are you feeling? How's your mother? What is new? How was that baseball game? All these things, and then it almost becomes the water cooler or the coffee hour conversation that gives us a sense of good. They care about me. I had a chance to share a little bit of my life before we get into the numbers. And so I think we've learned to be better meeting leaders, to really treat people with more empathy and more respect. We've learned how to do better meetings, to make them shorter, to make them more focused, and to just tell people what they need to know and not let time be wasted, because that's what makes people tired. Most meetings can be half of the time that they usually take just because they're not managed properly. So there's a lot more other lessons, but for the sake of time, I'll just leave you with those.
Well, that's true. I think you get far more accomplished on a Zoom meeting than you do in a meeting in person, because there's no wasted time. So I agree with you. Well, we have about 5 minutes left, Rosemary. What have we not talked about? What have we not brought up that you would like our audience to know?
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that I do the work I do in both languages. And that's something that I really take particular pride in, being able to just to serve executives, business leaders whose primary language or whose language of business is Spanish. And that's an area where I find that a lot of executives are bashful because they might have a very strong accent, and they feel that on Zoom, for example, because of the sound quality, they're not able to be understood, and they suffer a lot from that. They suffer also from the lack of reaction. I mean, you say something, you don't really know if the person got it or if they're just being polite. So that sense of anxiety that comes from having to speak a language that's not your dominant language it causes a lot of discomfort for people. So I've developed ways of helping people like that, sort of smooth that over. And so I love to be able to use my culture and my language, my native language, in the scope of my work. That's something I really enjoy. But if I may, again, if we're looking at the ageism, I just want to say something that we talk so much about diversity and inclusion, right? And
right.
We've got to understand, and business leaders, people who make the decisions, have to understand that when you're talking diversity, you've got to talk about multi-generations. You've got to talk about what Chip Conley calls, the wisdom workers, that having people of all ages in a work environment only enriches the quality of the work that's done. So that when we're talking diversity, we've got to put people over 50 into the equation.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about multi-generational, because in the Hispanic community, that is something that is very, very, very prevalent, and I think much more than the American culture. And so that's certainly a part of what people are involved with. And, I think it's beautiful, but it's also very unusual for an American family to have 3 or 4 generations living in one house or even working together. So it makes a big difference. So I totally agree that, that's part of it. Well, let's tell people once again, Rosemary, where is the best way to find out about what you do and to kind of follow you and track you?
My website has all the contact information. You can also sign up to receive my weekly newsletter. I put out a lot of information regarding every aspect of public speaking on Zoom, in person. And just this last week, I put out something regarding how to do great public speaking on Zoom. So there's a lot of information in my blog as well. You can look at my workshops, and that's rosemaryravinel.com.
And that's Ravinal, for those of you that may be thinking about this. And, she also, what I love is your Zoom score, because I probably always end up below the below the median, let's put it like that. But, it just is so amazing what can be done with just such a little effort. And that's what's important. And, if you do work with Rosemary, you're working with a gem. She's very precise. She's very demanding, and she's very good at what she does. And that's why she gets the results she does. So be prepared if you're going to work with her that you're going to work hard, but she's going to do a great job for you. And that's what's important. And that's what I think it's all about. And I cannot tell you how I really have enjoyed this interview, Rosemary, because I've known you not for a long time, but, a couple years. And I'm just really impressed with what you do and how you've created this whole new career for yourself after, all of the changes that we've been going through in this past year. I want to remind everybody else that you can go to my website, spunkyoldbroad.com, find out what I'm all about, see the courses that I have for you. And I have a wonderful store there. You can get SOB mugs and T-shirts and leggings and things like that. And if you want to sign up for my YouTube channel, you can do that at Spunky Old Broad as well. Thank you so much, Rosemary, for being with us today. We really are delighted.
Oh, Gail, this has been a delight and an honor. Thank you for the invitation.